Hello and welcome to the Strong Suit Podcast, where we focus on the people part of your business. Every single episode, I feature a world-class expert on talent and recruiting so that you can build a company filled with rockstars. And I am so pumped to speak with my guest today. Let me tell you a little about Mark Mader and the phenomenal company that he's building. And then for the next 20 minutes, we're going to talk about how he's done it, how he's built it, how he's recruited and retained a team of, get this, around 800 people that is bringing this product to market. So Mark is the president and CEO of Smartsheet, which you've probably heard of. It's a very fast-growing SaaS platform that's for planning and tracking and automating and reporting collaborative work, which of course is basically all work these days. They have over 75,000 customers, which includes half of the Fortune 500. So if you're not using Smartsheet, you probably will be soon. On a personal note, Mark has been named a Ernst & Young Entrepreneur of the Award in Technology. He's been CEO of the Year by GeekWire. He's built one of the best workplaces in Puget Sound. If I spend the next 20 minutes listing everything, I could still fill that time. To top all that off, Mark and his team have raised over $50 million in venture capital to fuel this rocket ship. And he'll correct me if I've got the numbers wrong, with great firms like Insight Venture Partners, Madrona, Sutter Hill, et cetera, et cetera. So with all that, please welcome my guest, Mark Mader. How are you, Mark?
Doing great. Thank you for having me.
Did I get those numbers close to correct?
It's always good to undersell. we raised about just over 100 million over the course of growing as a private company.
Yep.
And then in April of this year, April of 18, we went public. So that was also a capital event where we raised 160 some odd million to add to that.
Phenomenal. Well, congratulations on both fronts. And we'll talk about the people transformation from private to public, but we'll get to that in a little bit. So why don't we just start at a 60,000 foot view for a minute, give people kind of the backstory of Smartsheet, how it kind of came into being, just so they can understand the context that you as CEO speak with.
The company was formed based on a set of observations a group of people had serving customers in another tech company. And that was in a client-server 1990s CRM world. And what we found was that while there were a great many systems and ERP and CRM that were doing important things for companies and still do, there was a lot of work taking place within the front office. So think business teams that were housed in Office docs.
Yeah.
Literally
Microsoft Office.
Yeah.
Yeah.
PowerPoint, Docs, Word docs, and the king of all, Excel.
Yeah.
And what we observed was that so much important business was taking place in those docs, specifically Excel.
And still is, right?
Correct. That had nothing to do with what its original purpose was,
right,
which was a financial tracking mechanism.
Right.
People were making lists of work. So what we did is we wanted to build a SaaS company, a software as a service platform that connected with key point business people who could be empowered to graduate from sort of a hand-to-mouth existence with Office docs to a better way of working, defined as collecting information, organizing it, reporting out on it, and even automating it to a degree.
Got it. The whole enchilada. So when you reflect on this, because it's been it's been a rocket ship, let's be honest. Not only did you raise venture capital money, now you're a public company. You've got, was I right about 800 folks?
Yeah, just under 900 now.
What do you attribute that success to with regard to people? So I'm sure it's a phenomenal product. So that's something, great marketing, that's something. But with regard to people, what has made Smartsheet successful and unique?
I think people need to feel connected to what they build and who they serve. And absent a connectedness to your customer and to your colleagues, you really start solving for things that are brittle, whether it be the salary you're paid, whether it be the benefit you receive, whether it be the location to your home. These are all things that, if they're flexible, right? They can change in a whim. So life goes through peaks and valleys, and the relationships we have and the courtesy we show one another and the care we show for one another, that is extremely powerful. And it can help you celebrate amazing highs, but more challenging when things don't go to plan. You need to rely on those dimensions.
Right.
And it's funny you mentioned the term rocket ship. My wife, 4 years in, maybe wouldn't have described it as a rocket ship.
It's an overnight success, 5 years old, right?
Yeah, we were overnight sensation, 12 years in the making.
Right.
So there were some tough moments where we had to look at each other, and some of it can be sort of, you can chalk it up to revisionist history, right? Yep. But what I would like to remember is there were moments where we had to look at each other and say, hey, how do we all feel about taking that pay cut?
Yeah.
And granted, this was when we were, 10, 12 people.
Yeah.
But still, those moments, that's when you really have to tap the other things that define your working relationship.
Where did you, let me ask you on a personal level, Mark, where did you learn that? Did you have a great mentor along the way? Did you learn the hard way? Did you read some transformative book? Because not every leader that's listening to this call understands the importance of engaging their team and what difficulties it can see you through.
I think it's similar. The question reminds me of when somebody asks, what's the one thing that caused Smartsheet to take off? And I'm very quick to say, I'd love to know the answer. It's hundreds of things.
Yeah.
So I have a lot of respect for my two parents. I think they lived their lives the right way.
Were they business people or entrepreneurs?
My mom was a professor for 25 years at the college level. My father was in tech. Mm-hmm. I'm first generation German. I had a chance to interact with people from other countries early on. My father often had business colleagues over at the house from Japan and Australia and Germany and the UK and Canada and Mexico. And I think when you see a great diversity in people and how they treat one another, you realize that there are differences in how they treat one another. But there's always this common element of you can get past a lot of differences in approach and tones and postures. And if there's that core that people believe in, I think they can form very tight relationships. So I think that was actually a pretty big part of my upbringing.
Yeah, it sounds like it really exposed you at a very young age, right?
It did.
So that's you, as you began to build a leadership team and recruit the team at large, what characteristics or DNA, other than competencies and skills, did you look for? Did you articulate that early? Did you write it down on paper? Or there certain non-negotiables early on in the early days?
Well, I think I would speak more to the last 3 years of our growth than the early days, because the early days, a lot of it is circumstance. So when you're trying to convince someone to join your team of 15 people, where the revenue is inconsequential,
right,
and you're talking more about hope than demonstrated success, a lot of things go into being able to convince people to join you. As you grow, your opportunity is improved because people are aware of your brand, and there's some stability from a balance sheet standpoint, and all those factors. And I think it becomes a real test in, what are you not good at? What is your team not good at? How can you not focus on culture fits, but culture adds?
So that's a Brad Feld and a few other really thought leaders have talked about this. For the listeners that haven't been exposed to this concept, Mark, can you just explain culture add versus culture fit? Because I could not agree more.
Yeah, I think the culture fit is, hey, we have this wonderful dynamic here. Here's how we treat each other. Here's how we innovate. Here's how we ideate and share information. Let's do more of that. There's tremendous value in infusing a new way of thinking that is not different than yours in terms of a principled way to live, but how do you look at things differently? How do you take someone's background, which maybe not cut from the same cloth as yours, because that is of value. You need to have representation across. We serve 75,000 plus companies today. That is a diverse group of customers.
Yeah.
So how does your leadership team and how does your team as a whole reflect that same diversity? And I would say the term culture add has been, the term has been really put emphasis on the word culture, but it's also around hard skills.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Filling the gaps that needed to be filled.
So what are my tendencies? If I could choose to do one thing tomorrow, I probably shouldn't hire my next senior exec who wants to do the exact same thing.
Right. Yeah.
It's about balance, and it's difficult because you need to be honest with yourself. You need to be open to feedback from your VCs and others who've been with you a long time to say, hey, Mark, here's what we think you're great at, and here's maybe a little bit of a blind spot.
Yeah, and you got to be open to that. Let's talk at a tactical level for a few minutes about recruiting. So you've recruited almost 900 people. I assume that's continuing to increase. Then you've had attrition along the way. So you've hired well over 1,000 over time. What's the most unique part of the recruiting process? Something that you think is a very unique element to the Smartsheet process?
How do you maintain a level of personal touch and authenticity in a process that is scaling significantly? How do you make the person not feel like you're applying for job spec 38B, head down the hall, take a right, then go left, and you're going to this stark room and meet people whose names you won't remember? That's not how we try to roll it. And it's not just within our Bellevue campus, it's within our Boston campus, within our Edinburgh, Scotland campus. How do you really project to the candidate that, boy, is this company 900 people or 100 people?
So give us an example. Let's say I'm interviewing for a marketing job. What might I see that I may not see from another company?
The term candidate care is something we talk about a lot. We have recruiters, we have sourcers, and we have recruiting coordinators. So what does a recruiting coordinator do? The recruiting coordinator makes sure that when that person is approaching our building, they have everything they need to feel comfortable. Then they're not worried about, where do I park? What floor is it? Who do I? They know who they're speaking to.
It's like a concierge at a hotel.
It totally is. And guess what? You remember those experiences.
Yeah. It'll make the difference in accepting this offer versus that offer.
It could. And those are the types of things that require a significant amount of intentional action. Those don't just happen.
Right.
And we want to have a certain amount of uniformity across that experience, right? So if you're being recruited for engineering versus marketing versus FinOps, we want to project that same level of quality and consistency.
Right. So I'm guessing your close rate, meaning percentage of candidates that accept offers, is probably higher than some other companies. What are you doing to fill the top of the funnel, to fill the pipeline? Do you do college recruiting? Are you poaching from competitors? What are you doing? Do you spend your nights on LinkedIn? How do you find these people?
It's multiple sources. We have a very robust intern program, which has contributed to our hiring over the last 3 years. This summer, I think we have 22 interns.
Wow. That's paid internships or unpaid?
Well-paid internships.
Well-paid intern. Sign me up.
And it's been fantastic. It has brought a different class of ideation and innovation to our workforce. And the neat thing is, it's not just engineering, right? We're seeing this thing in marketing. We're seeing it. We have I talked to a support intern yesterday, and the level of enthusiasm that he has and what he's able to do early in his career, it's infectious, right? So that's the thing. Again, it's not just what skill do you have, but how do you bring extra energy? And so that's one. We do a lot of community meetups. Mm-hmm. That's one where we might not have a specific hiring agenda, but it's about bringing community together. And if you're able to demonstrate that your company's doing interesting things, bringing people together, that really resonates with some people. Got
it. Aside from recruiting, the other side of the coin, of course, is retention. How has retention been, and how do you kind of think about retention, especially in a rapidly growing company where the business might actually outgrow some people and their skill sets and abilities? How do you kind of think about retention?
First thing I think of is retention is not a reactive sport. So if I'm reacting to a retention situation, I'm way late in the game.
Yeah.
And I think there's also the recognition that most people do not feel comfortable coming to you and articulating what they expect out of their career. So what can you do as a leader or a manager to provide them an open forum for having that conversation, for really digging, like, how can we support you?
Yeah. So that's stay interviews, not exit interviews, right?
Correct. And it's remarkable because even if you have a quote open door policy, recognize that most people will not go through the open door.
Yeah.
For whatever reason.
Yeah. So you need to seek them out.
You need to seek them out, and then really understand. We've done this more in the last 2 years, understanding things like succession planning.
Yeah.
And succession planning is it's not a bad thing. It's not, oh my gosh, Bob's leaving the building or Jenny's leaving the building. It's about how to also give people confidence in their future at the firm.
Right.
And that is a good dynamic.
If you were to tally up over the course of a month, the percentage of time that you as CEO are working on people stuff, so that's retention, interviews, proactive stay interviews, exit interviews, reference checking, the whole enchilada. What percent of your time do you think you spend on this stuff?
I won't even take a crack at it because what's important to me is I actually don't live my life sort of through formula. So I don't have 32% of my day needs to be this or that because I don't get to predict fully what happens each day.
That's fair.
So I think when you are presented with that situation, or you see that person whose name you don't remember, or you heard of someone do something sensational, you have to take the time to engage.
Yeah.
And it's never 32% of a day or a week. It's you have to be able to recognize the moments. And then as the team's gotten bigger, being very comfortable with and encouraging the distribution of accountability and leadership in the organization.
Yeah. Was that a difficult transition? You joined at what point? How big was the business?
Pre-revenue, pre-product, 6 people.
Okay, six people. So going from 6 to 900. Yeah. At what point did you ever struggle with that? Letting go?
Sure. People want to feel needed, right? People want to feel connected. They want to feel like they're in the know. I mean, who doesn't want to feel that way?
Right.
But you have to make hard choices and say, even though I'm deeply curious about what our mobile development team is doing right this second, I can't go walk down 5 floors and spend 3 hours.
Right.
It's not a good use of time.
Right. And it may send the wrong message too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, it's very difficult, but you have to be planful. And that's one where, while it's not a formula on my desk, I definitely have a few things that I try to achieve, for instance, this year in terms of organizational engagement.
Mm-hmm.
I have to nudge myself once in a while.
Right. And what do you mean by that, by organizational engagement?
Well, where you spend your time, what you expect.
Okay. Got it.
How you lead, how you manage, how you react to situations, encouraging other people to solve things as opposed to solving it for them. Those are all things that, as part of that transition you talk about, you have to be able to exhibit that change.
When it comes to folks that have left the organization, not folks that you invited to pursue their career elsewhere, but people who left of their own volition and you really, lost sleep about it because they were a big loss. Hopefully it's not too many, but what did you learn that you might have done differently? Now, sometimes they'll get an offer you just can't compete with. It's crazy. But aside from money, anything you could have done differently in those cases that you think about or that you have done differently?
There have been it's an interesting question. It's the first person I thought of was the person who actually is still on the roster with us, who came to me back when we were about 45 people. He was integral to our existence. And he said, Mark, I think in about 5 months, if my situation doesn't change, I'm going to have to leave. And I'm so grateful to him for having given me runway to help him. And we were able to find his successor. He ended up having a high impact job. He's still with us, 850 people later. The people who leave where it might have been avoidable based on us not having engaged thoroughly enough to understand what their intent was and what their desires were, shame on us.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it hasn't happened that much. There are cases where where the organization outgrows people. Mm-hmm. And that's, I think, one of the most difficult moments in that's been in my career where, to use a sports analogy, hi, Peter, we need a new starting point guard. We'd love you to be first one off the bench. And they say, I'm still the point guard, Mark.
Yeah, that's tough.
At 43 years old, even though I can't jump off the floor anymore and I can't. And it's tough. And those are, and I think that's what's particularly challenging is when you've built a company from 6 people to hundreds, you develop friendships.
Yeah.
And
it goes beyond an org chart, right?
And what I believe is even though those are very, very difficult situations, you don't not build friendships to avoid those moments. I'll make that trade all day long. And so we typically try to get to know each other better, support one another more deeply, even though the breakup will be more difficult. And guess what? When we are adding tens of people a month, right? We lose people every month, and it's the nature of the game.
Especially in a red hot labor market like we're in now.
Yeah.
We touched earlier on the transition from private company to public company. So I want to circle back to that as a last topic. Aside from the cliche things like, the IPO is not an exit or the end, it's the beginning, blah, 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 blah. What with an eye to people and the organization, was there anything that did change during that process? Even the pre-IPO stages, whether it was swapping people out because they just wouldn't make sense in a public company context, or perhaps you added people that had public company experience, whatever it may be?
I think it's, I would say there's a level of discipline that's needed and an appreciation for rigor that is demanded by being a public company. And some people prefer to approach their training in a little bit, more lightweight or ad hoc manner.
Yeah.
And that's one where we did a lot of check downs with our senior team and our one level removed as we approached that moment. And what was very important to us is not shock the system and say, hey, welcome to the office one day, we're doing this. And everyone's like, what the heck's going on? So how do you enroll people as you're building to that event so that when it happens, it really does feel like, oh, great moment, fantastic moment, but not a shock to the system.
Right.
And that takes, I give our head of people ops a lot of credit for helping guide us through that process.
What was the biggest pain involved in going public with regard to the people part of the business?
Well, it strikes a personal chord with me because the toughest part was looking at my girls and my spouse and recognizing that there's probably going to be 2 years ahead, which are really demanding.
Yeah. You thought this was demanding, just wait, you're about to see demanding, right?
And those are moments where you don't think that you're the only one going through that. Everybody on our team and their families is going through it too.
Yeah.
So that's a level of commitment that you not only need from your colleagues, but from your families.
Yeah.
And the more you can enroll your family and your colleagues into what you're trying to do and why you're doing it, the more they can support you. Yeah. So that's the first thing I think of when you ask that question.
Yeah, they really have to be signed up to that kind of journey, right? Just like a family needs to be signed up to a startup if the person is married or in a relationship.
And the term signed up, very often there's this negative connotation, right? It's going to be super hard. Life's going to be terrible. No. The great things in life require work and dedication. So I think when I see my children, seeing people succeed and seeing people they've known, they've seen me work with for 20 years have that moment, it's a great message to send.
Sure.
It's not all bad. It's great. It just requires a lot of work.
Well, and to come full circle to your dad's travels and the international exposure he gave you at a young age, obviously that's something you're sharing with your girls as well.
Yeah.
Well, Mark, I give you an immense amount of credit. This is as rocket ship as a rocket ship gets, both in terms of the business and the people, your public offering. Congratulations. Many successes ahead. How can people learn more about Smartsheet or get in touch with you?
Well, we're an online service that any team in any industry can check out and use to their advantage. So www.smartsheet.com, fire it up, and we are an engaging company in that if you have a question, reach out to us and we will help you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for making the time today.
Thanks much.